Welcome to Navigating the Aftermath, the podcast where we explore the journey of rebuilding and rediscovery after life storms. Join us as we delve into stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation, offering insights and inspiration to guide you through your own path of healing and growth. Welcome back to another episode of Navigating the Aftermath. Today I have Coach Courtney with me, and we're going to talk about Sex and the City. And just really using this show with all the movies that followed after the show, what relationship actually are, how Hollywood glamorizes certain parts, leaving some other parts. And if you like this show, if you would like to hear our thoughts, two coaches, two girlfriends chatting about Sex and the City, pour yourself a drink of something refreshing or heartwarming, and let's dive right in. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, Dasha.
Thank you for joining me. Yeah, it's such a fun topic. So how old were you when you first watched Sex and the City?
So I know it's been around a long time, but I think the core memory I have of kind of like first realizing what I was watching and realizing that it was like a series was probably 2012. Like it was right after I had graduated college and I had a part-time internship. So I would spend some afternoons at home, and they played it on E. I don't know if you watched that channel E, but they would have Sex and the City on repeat during the afternoons. So it's kind of funny. I felt like, they were just, they rerun shows at that time of day that kind of ran their course. And so I wasn't all that particularly interested in it because I was like, oh, they don't make new episodes of this show anymore. But I did catch myself having it on as background noise, and then I would start watching more and more episodes. So I would say 2012 is probably when my interest was piqued.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, for me, I was born and raised in Russia, so I probably have slightly different perspective. I was 16, 17 when my friend and I were really just glued and watching it. And we had a friend who could bring us the DVDs. And I begged my parents to buy me DVD. They refused. So I saved up. I got a summer job. So there was the whole thing that went into it because it became very popular. And I believe that it was about like 2003, 2004 when I watched it, yeah, going into college. And that was my guide. I was fantasizing about this glamorous life and really just wanted to go to New York, really wanted to be like part of their friends group. And I really saw it as a guide to the relationships, which is now thinking I just rewatched the show from the psychological perspective and be like, oh my God, how could I even think that that was healthy? I really resonated with Carrie. Who did you resonate with, Courtney?
Funny. Interesting to hear your background with Sex and the City, especially from somebody who is from Russia originally. Um, I'm trying to think of who I resonated with the most. I felt like there were parts of each character that I resonated with. I think um such Charlotte, she was a little bit more of like a prude and kind of picky about the guys that she dated. I admired that about her. Uh especially in like stark contrast to Samantha, who was just kind of like wanted whatever guy was passing by on the streets, it seemed. No, I know that's a generalization of her, but they were just such polar opposites. But I valued Samantha's kind of like free spirited. Um, she's definitely a girl's girl for sure, and I appreciated that about her. Carrie, I'm a writer, or I have been most of my life, and so I appreciated her kind of like poetic and romanticizing, uh, certain things about life. And then Samantha, or no, I'm sorry, who was the other one?
Brenda.
Miranda, yes. she was a little bit, she's like more practical and she's a lawyer on the show and she's got a little bit of a thicker skin and a good sense of humor. So I don't know, I can't say I resonated with one of them any more than the other, but I did appreciate different components of their personalities.
Yeah, I rewatching the show literally a month ago. I ended watching the show and feeling like, oh my gosh, I really resonated with Samantha. The not the part of the sex, but the part that she was so open about who she was. She didn't really give a damn that what anybody else thought. She was such a good friend. She always showed up for her girlfriends. She never judged them. And I like now rewatching the show, I was like, come on, ladies, she deserved so much better. And another part, rewatching that, I was like, why, as a teenager, I was so drawn. By the way, it drove my parents nuts, absolutely bananas, because I was such a huge fan of the show. I probably could recite some lines from the show if I was waking up in the middle of the night, and my parents could not stand it. This obsession. But now, like, I'm watching it as a 36-year-old woman. They are 30 something in the beginning of the show. And I was like, they act like teenagers.
Mhm.
What do you think? Like, do you see that they are like more like teenagers?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely interesting to watch it back because I guess when I first came across it in 2012, I was, and again, I knew the show had been around, but that was just the first time I had watched it, which I'm always kind of slow on the uptake with shows and series, so that's not surprising. But when I watched it when I was 22, it was glamorous, and it was fun, and it was kind of uh, flirtatious. And now that I'm 33 now, and I do find a lot of immaturity in some of the ways that they act. Again, I can appreciate it because I like that they're not bound to their age necessarily. And I know that that's kind of the lifestyle, at least in New York City. Um, but yeah, it is interesting watching it back 10 years later or thinking about it 10 years later because I think uh there's a lot of controversial things and uh ways of being or in relationships specifically that I just don't that don't resonate with me anymore. Or I didn't view it the same way as I viewed it when I was in my 20s when I first started watching it.
Yeah, and there are lifestyles that now again rewatching it, being a divorce and a resource coach, and I teach women how to budget and how, like, not only money but time and their effort, their energy. Looking at Carrie, being like, oh my gosh, she's broke and she's so fixated on buying Manolo Blahnik and Jimmy Choo's and all of these designer labels, and yet she was really broke. She didn't have any savings. And I was like, oh my God. As a teenager, I really thought, oh, that she is so cool. Like, she doesn't think of the future, she just goes and spends it. And I was like, oh my God, like, she's my age. How come she did this? So it's just really, again,
So
it,
irresponsible.
yes, right? So
Yeah.
responsible. And what about the relationships, right? Like, I really, since I not only I resonated to Carrie, I want to be like brutal honest, I really identified with Carrie.
Hmm.
And I got myself into relationships. They are kind of like this. And the scariest part as an adult that I thought back then that they're healthy relationships because they ended up together. And then when the movies came, and I remember my daughter was little and I cried. Oh my gosh. I cried in the movie theater and how Big left her. And now again, rewatching it, I was like, how come they got back together? That is such unhealthy relationships, and they were not supposed to be together. Like, how come we have this in the movies, and as women we watch that and was like fantasize, romanticize this and feel like, oh, I want this too because it looks really cool. Like he is a handsome guy, he's wealthy, he's so sure of himself. And now I look at him, he is such a textbook narcissist. What are your thoughts about this relationships and how this portrayed in like on screen movies or TV shows and how it can be damaging, right? For the right.
Yeah, it can be for sure. And on the one hand, like, it's entertaining, right? And we want the happy ending, if you will. But on the other hand, like you're saying, it's kind of painting a picture of a pretty unhealthy situation. And I think subconsciously we can kind of download that and believe that that's what we should be looking for, or we should be accepting certain um, characteristics or behaviors from men. And yeah, like we were talking about previously to this discussion, I think Hollywood glamorizes and puts a little bit too much emphasis on chemistry in relationships and not as much on partnership qualities that women should be looking for. Granted, you want both ideally at the end of the day. You want to be attracted to your partner and you want to feel excited to see them and feel attracted. But there's also this component of making sure you're with somebody who can put as much effort into a relationship as you can. And I think, the movie Sex and the City and how Big left her at the altar, oh gosh, just awful to think about.
Yeah.
um, but I feel like that is just one example of many of that relationship between Carrie and Big that was toxic. Um, and so I think at the end of the day, it's important to keep in mind that some of these characteristics or behaviors are not healthy, and that you don't want that in your life just because that's what Sex and the City's storyline is. Because it's not, yeah, it's not real life. And that's okay. But it's important to have that healthy perspective and stay grounded in what you're looking for in a relationship versus being influenced by some of these movies and shows that paint a different picture of relationships. Because, uh, in my opinion, the writing is on the wall with Carrie and Big's relationship. I think it was pretty toxic, and lots of ups and downs along the way that I would never tolerate in real life because it was a pattern. And so, anyway, that's my take on it.
Ah, absolutely. And just again, like rewatching it, and as a parent, I would never show it to my kid. And my daughter is 14. So I was about her age when I started watching it. I was like, oh my gosh, no, it is so damaging. I would never ever. And back when in the beginning of 2000, that was like very revolutionary, right? Like talking women of that age feeling okay, feeling not just okay, but feeling fabulous, being single and feeling young. Look how gorgeous they are. So it just really gives that vibe too, right? Is like they're awesome, they are self-sufficient, especially Samantha. Like she was so successful and she worked hard, but also she had so much fun. And I always really saw her like, oh my gosh, she's just too much. And all of this, I just couldn't really handle. I kind of like rewind Samantha when I watched it as a kid, as a teenager. But now again, she just knows who she is. And the choices would I would also kind of judge and really be not judge maybe, but be, hey, maybe you gotta really go to therapy if you want to use men, and just feel the void, or like Carrie using shopping to feel the void, like glamorizing being a shopaholic,
Mm.
like all of these pieces. But I feel like they're so educational. And speaking of education, I learned a lot of slang from Sex and the City. When I came as a foreign student here in my school, as like learning English as second language, we had the special class, Sex and the City class. It was always packed, but the professor, the instructor would just stop the video and be like, "What slang did you hear?" And we were supposed to write it down because this show is just full with slang. Just a fun fact, a side note for some foreign speakers, they want to learn English. That is a great show to learn a lot of slang. Yeah.
Oh, that is so interesting. I didn't even realize that Sex and the City was like such a iconic show outside of the States. So that's a fun perspective and a fun story to hear. Um, yeah, that it just there were different things about that show that captured the interest of people all over the world. It was very, very glamorous. And again, I didn't watch the show at its peak time. I was, I fell behind on that that train. It had left the tracks by the time I finally started watching it, or left the station, I should say. Um, but yeah, there's just a lot to unpack about that show. And it does um, really paint a very glamorous picture of American city lifestyle. So I can see why it was a show that you gravitated to for sure. And the relationship piece, there's a lot to unpack there too. I want to go back to something you said about Samantha, because the more we talk about her, and things that you said about her, I have like a renewed appreciation for her almost, because she was always the person that I just kind of cringed, like, oh gosh, like she talks about sex way too much. Like it feels so inappropriate. And I've always kind of just, been a prude when it comes to that kind of stuff anyways. So it always made me cringe. But the more I think about it, you're right. She was very um grounded in her individuality, I guess. Like she wasn't swayed by the opinions of others. She wasn't wooed by certain men. And she was very like blunt and straight to the point. Like she called it out like it was. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, especially in this kind of a show when, it feels like, the other three are just trying to like be seen and keep up with the lifestyle and have this really bougie romantic life. And she's just over here kind of doing her thing and naturally fitting into all of it, but still being herself all the while. So,
And it's interesting now we're talking about it. Just so Carrie is new money, same as Miranda and Samantha, and then Charlotte, she's like really old money. She gravitates to that, and with Trey, right? That she was, oh my gosh, he's a doctor, and he became a doctor with his family's money. They have this house in Connecticut, like all of this, like really just very stereotypical in my eyes. That is like old money. This is Charlotte, and how when they had this like with finances, how she really treated money differently. But it's interesting, of all the three who are new money, that Miranda was so proud of her achievements, and rightfully so, while Carrie was just really splurging in all of the all of the clothes. Like I invest my money where I see it in my closet. And Samantha was just, it was a part of her, but she didn't really focus on that so much. And I never
mhm.
thought about it from that perspective before our conversation. It's a pretty cool realization, and that just a different attitude to money as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely a new appreciation for Samantha. That's
Ah,
that's
yeah.
for sure.
I wonder if I rewatch this show several years in the future, I'm like, okay, some other things. And I remember that Miranda had to write in the beginning of the series when she just bought her apartment, and she was asked, and that was what, 1999, like 2000. that is like, is it your father paying? Is it your partner? Do you have a boyfriend? And she's like, I'm single, I'm single. And she had to fill out extra paperwork because she was a single woman. And then she had to write an email saying, you made a mistake, I'm not married, I am single. And she had the whole, like the part of the episode that she felt so emotional, and she had to just be like, take a deep breath, sit with her laptop and be like, I am single. And she had such a big, it was like, oh my gosh, I am single. And it's so interesting how the perspective changed. I feel like now we're more okay of being single, that we don't have to be married. But I'm divorced for 5 years. I only now start thinking about having a relationship, having romantic relationships. And probably without that show, I would feel odd because it's so ingrained that if you're a woman, you gotta be married. This is how you're healthy, you're happy, and you just complete. But with Sex and the City portraying that you don't have to be, and actually the marriages that they had, they all were dysfunctional in like one way or the other. What do you think?
Hmm. Yeah, I think as you're talking, I'm just recalling so many like themes of the show. And I think they did a really great job in a way of like balancing, celebrating being a woman and figuring it all out, because there was like a lot of beauty in the chaos. And they had each other, right? They really prioritized their female relationships. So on the one hand, they did that, and then on the other hand, they were still focused on finding relationships. Um, so that was, yeah, it was like they were just kind of like dancing with each other. This like idea of being single, being a woman in your 30s and 40s, and then and celebrating that and finding so much to love and enjoy about it and the journey. And then this also, wanting a relationship. So I think it was definitely a dance on that show, and they did a good job of, I think, speaking to the importance of both being in a relationship as well as celebrating your individuality and trusting the process. Um, I'm trying to think, what was the other part of your question?
Oh, gee.
I
I was like,
feel like I
there's
went
so,
down a
yeah,
different.
so many realizations are coming in. But yeah, so
Yeah.
their marriages end up being dysfunctional. Like
Mm.
again, like Samantha was the only one with well, with Richard, he was stronger than she was. Not that he was right for her, Mr. Right, but he was stronger than her, very charismatic, and she fell for him and she said, I love you, but I love me more. And then she left, and she never stayed in the relationship out of convenience. And then with Smith, that she was like, he stayed in chemo with me, and I believe it was in the movie, the first, that she was like, but I have to stay in the relationship with him. And then they're like, sweetie, you just compared your relationship with chemo. And then she was like, oh yeah, I have to break up with him. But she did it beautifully. Like she, with Richard, she just laughed gracefully. With Smith, she's like, I love you, but you gotta find a woman who loves relationships. And she was like, and then when she went lesbian with Maria, I believe her name was, the Portuguese
I
artist.
didn't even realize she did.
Ah, she was very
Carried it.
open, yeah, exploring, and she was like, she brought
Oh,
the news to her friends, and she was like, that is me now. And she discussed that. She didn't, she cared about her friends, but at the same time, I loved how she put the boundaries, like, I'm exploring, I'm doing what feels right to me at the moment. And it didn't work out, but she changed. Like, she's like, oh, that's an intimacy piece and all of this. And she was like, really kind of like learning lessons. And yeah, it's like really interesting how, again, like with Smith, when she broke up, is like, I love you, but I love me more, and I want to focus on the relationship with myself. And this particular phrase really helped me through my divorce, because I was like, yeah, I really want to focus on me and my relationship with myself. Because like looking at Miranda's marriage, I'm like, why did she end up with Steve? he acts like a child. Like he's not a grown man. Like why would she pick, like why would she want to be a big mama? Or like Carrie and Big and Charlotte and Trey, and then well Charlotte and what's his name? Harry, her divorce lawyer. They seemed nice, you know, like a good fit, but also I don't know. They're just like there's always something off in those marriages. So I don't know. What's your take on it?
Yeah, this is, I feel like, a good topic to dive into as it relates to this show. I, yeah, there were a lot of toxic components of some of their relationships. But at the same time, like you said, there was something that was said on the show that really resonated with you and helped you through your own divorce. So I think that the show in general, like I was saying earlier, is like it shows all the different components. It shows like healthy, you know, healthy relationships with yourself and with your girlfriends, and pursuing romantic relationships. And it also shows like the toxic side of relationships, where when you prioritize chemistry too much, or prioritize the end goal of getting married too much and ignoring the red signs along the way, that's also a part of it. So I feel like now that we're talking about it, it's very comprehensive show because it has good and bad to it. Um, but I think it's important as you look back on it to recognize what's healthy and what isn't, because when you're young and vulnerable and not as experienced, you might think that everything is realistic, or um, something worth going after when you watch the show. But I think with experience and time, when you look back on it, you're like, okay, there was good and there was the bad and the ugly and the things that aren't realistic that you wouldn't really want for your own personal journey. And to be able to kind of um, look at both aspects and appreciate the show for what it is, um, and not, get too hung up on, the it's super toxic, or it was like my favorite show of all time, but like recognize there were good and bad parts of it that kind of painted a holistic view of the way our society approaches relationships. I think that's important for sure.
Yeah, and it's also yeah that friendship component that I always felt so envious. I was like, I really wish I had the soulmates with girlfriends and we're staying through
Mm-hmm.
all of it. And I know it happens. Like there are people in such groups that they just stay friends for a long time. And the friendship, the female friendship really portrayed there so well, and how they navigated this like guilt and shame and judgment, and how they supported one another regardless. And then when Carrie cheated on Aiden with Big, and she was saying, I'm so fortunate to have four people who love me no matter what, my paraphrasing. But also it's like, yeah, that's so important to have that. And when she was leaving to Paris, I could totally relate because I was rewatching that last season, last couple of episodes, and I was about to leave to the United States. And then I was, yeah, it was very interesting. I really romanticized that for sure. But it helped me to make a decision to come here. I was such a homebody, such a child that was like very um, immature when I came to the States. I grew up really fast, just being on my own and with a friend as students. So it was a very interesting experience, but that really helped to just take the leap of faith. Luckily, at the time, I didn't know the last episode. So the last episode that I watched before coming to the States was when Carrie was in the one horse sleigh with Alexander Petrovsky. And that was it. I was so glad that I didn't know there were another episode after that when Big came and swooped her in Paris and all of that, and just all went kaboom with the artist that she was dating. But like, she left her life for a man, and I pretty much did the same when I came back to Russia, and then came back as I met my then husband during my stay as a foreign student. He invited me back. So it was like I really feel like that show been with me through so many phases of my life that I can talk about it a lot. But I want to touch more on the relationship piece, like how the it's portrayed and how we really gotta know, like so many of us don't know what healthy relationships are because it's a would be such a boring show, one episode 5 minute long show, that if it was about healthy relationships. So I wonder, how do you see healthy relationships? How would you portray, like let's take Carrie and Big, they're such big love story on screen. If we convert it into healthy relationship, how would you describe that? What would that look like?
Well, I have to preface and say that it's been a while since I've seen the show, so I'm working off of the little memory I have of it. But I think that something toxic about Big's behaviors was his inability to commit. And I feel like he was constantly like in and out of her life for different reasons. And that to me is pretty unhealthy. I know there's something to be said for, it not being the right time for people. Maybe they're not ready for a relationship, but I think as a woman who wants to be in a committed relationship, if you find yourself with somebody who is in and out and wanting to commit, just can't bring themselves to do it and to treat you with dignity and respect like you would to them, um, then it's important to realize and recognize those reoccurring habits in that lack of commitment. Because, who's to say Big and Carrie couldn't have avoided all of, a lot of arguments and heartache along the way if they had just really taken the time and space to realize what they want and then come into each other's lives at a point when they were both ready. Hot take, I guess, but that is, I mean, that is something that I feel like I could speak to as it relates to real life. Is I think a lot of women out there are ready to be in committed relationships, and in this day and age I feel like men are more reluctant to, or at least so I hear from my single friends who are on these dating apps and get ghosted. And it's hard to find somebody who's consistently, well, I shouldn't say it's hard, because I don't want women out there to think that it's hard, because it is doable for sure. What you think you attract. But it's important to find somebody who is committed to you the way that you would be committed to them. And yes, you're not going to go on a first date and, sign a contract. You have to be with me and you have to show up on dates. It doesn't work that way. But if you recognize that somebody is in and out of your life and just isn't really ready to commit, that pattern is just going to continue until they decide to make the change. You can't make it for them. You can't force them to commit to a relationship. So it's important to recognize it and then, give yourself and them the space to figure out what's best and whether or not the relationship is worth trying for. So,
Yeah, I agree. And for me, specializing in divorces, like very challenging, difficult ones with toxic partners. I sometimes use, if my client knows Sex and the City, I bring Karen big iconic relationships as textbook perfect narcissistic dynamic. And they're all of this, push, pull. He's not answering her questions or answering the question with a question, or really saying something super vague or something kind of like sexy and something, um, I don't know, snarky. That is kind of like, what do you think of soulmates? Like, remove soul and mate, like this is me, or like this kind of cute things, but like really, if cuteness, like put cuteness aside, it was like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's not ready to commit. And then she was not ready to commit either. Otherwise, she would end up with Aiden, the guy who really wanted to commit. So it's, yeah,
He
like
was such a cute guy.
you
I thought
was.
Aiden was always so cute. I was like secretly rooting for him on the side, like, pick him, pick him.
I know he is such a great guy. And then but yeah, kind of like having this awareness. And it's hard when the guy is very handsome. And I remember Samantha was kind of like, he's a new Donald Trump. And well, back when he was not even thinking about being a president, that he's cute and he's handsome and he's wealthy, he's young, all of this, and it's easy to fall for. And he's like super charismatic, but just really knowing the narcissistic dynamics, I was like watching the shows. I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I attracted
Hmm.
from my teenage, yeah, years. I attracted that in my adult life, which is fine, kind of like it's good to know what, like you said, we attract what we think. And
Yeah.
just picking the partner that resonates, and like, not, we don't have to really put pause in our lives to really fit in their lives, and there is some common ground, right? There is some mutual respect, and there the trust, and then just the conversation. There should be that connection as well, which it's like when one prevails, another, that might be that imbalance. But kind of like finding that well-rounded person, being a well-rounded person, right? We'll talk a lot about be the partner you want to attract first.
Hmm. Yeah. Something that you said about those narcissistic qualities kind of reminds me of this has been going on for decades, if not longer than that. But like uh, when you're little and the boy pushes you on the playground and you're like, oh, that means he likes me. And
Yeah.
it's like this, that's the start of it. What is that movie called? It's uh he's just not that into you.
Oh yes.
That's that movie. That's like the first opening scene. And it's really just kind of diving into these like old beliefs that we have of like what a fun relationship is. And I think that we've been programmed to a certain degree to believe that like we should be with a man that we have to fix, or a man that's like a challenge, or a man that like drives us mad, but we're also madly in love with him. And I don't, I just don't know. I don't know why I'm saying I don't know. I know that that's not healthy for the long term.
Mhm.
um Obviously being married to anybody, or even just not even marriage, but being with somebody for a long time, of course there are going to be moments where they drive you mad because you're two individual human beings coming together with a completely different set of beliefs and experiences that have shaped you to who you are today. So of course there's going to be some friction points along the way, but being with somebody who has those narcissistic qualities, or a man who belittles women because it, or who has a host of problems that they don't do anything about, or who gaslights you into believing that you're the one with the issues. Like,
Or you have to fill in the blanks.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
and, like, really make up
Mind
part of,
games.
yeah, like the story, or like
Hmm.
you approach somebody with a straightforward question, you not getting the straightforward answer, like, right, all of these things.
Right.
You're absolutely right. We've been taught
Yeah.
since yay high that, oh, the boy pushes you, the boy just like tugs your hair, or they just hit you, they throw stuff at you. Oh, he likes you. That is so adorable. No, it's not.
It's not. No, no, it's like some weird excuse we just wrote off to make ourselves feel better or to just put up with poor behavior. And this isn't like, a conversation to like slander men because not all guys are like this, but I do think that um sorry, I don't know if you can hear the police, so I'm just waiting. Okay. I swear I live in a good neighborhood.
No,
Lots of
you're
activity. Um,
fine.
but yeah, so this isn't to slander men by any means at all, but it's just a matter of realizing that there are certain men out there who embody these narcissistic characteristics or qualities, and being able to identify them as not healthy for the long term. In fact, I wouldn't even recommend getting involved with them in the short term because you might get swept into their energy field and not be able to really get out of it. So I think being able to recognize those qualities is definitely important. But it's interesting that as a society, we've kind of embraced that storyline for so long. And in so many ways, it's hurt us as women because we not only put up with it, I feel like a lot of us even look for it. We look for a guy who's hard to get or who's hard to understand. And it's like we love a challenge. And
Yeah.
I think it's important to realize that if you love a challenge, it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
And if you really want the love and ease, then you can have that if you stop looking for the challenge or stop going after the challenge. Because that's not, if you think about raising a family and all of the responsibilities that come with that, and not even just raising a family, but building a life for yourself, the last thing that you need is another challenge. You
Yeah.
want somebody next to you, at least I do, and I'm sure many of us can relate, who can help you take on those challenges in life. You don't need another challenge. And so, any guy who comes into your life, and this goes for women too. I mean, there are a lot of women out there who act this way as well. Um, but sorry, as it pertains to guys, I would definitely recommend finding one that doesn't make your life harder than it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, I believe that Marilyn Monroe said, I can be miserable on my own. I don't have to be miserable in marriage, or something like this, right? That it's, yeah, like somebody to help with a load, will just make life easier together. And it's, yeah, it's very interesting that we really, all of the movies, all of the books, great love stories, there's always a challenge. And in Sex and the City, they touched on that as well. That is there always something? There should be like act one, act two, with all the drama. Should there be drama? And I was like, the answer is no. Drama should stay in the theater, right? That it's in real life, that life changes so rapidly. We have so many challenges. We juggle so much. And the speed of life, it's so just fast. How to keep up with that? And if there is a partner next to us being really adding to that, that just not gonna end well for either or both. And definitely it was like with Sex and the City, the women were the focus, but also like they're like I see Carrie being pretty narcissistic as well. So it was like really seeing the traits. They actually now like I think they actually belong together because they really like poking and pushing each other buttons and really getting the high of the adrenaline and of all of this. And just they're a perfect couple. I take my words back. They do belong together. So, but just really knowing the red flags and really knowing what healthy relationships look like is super important. And I don't feel it's talked enough. Like it doesn't really override the conversation about healthy relationship, doesn't override yet portraying and talk about unhealthy relationships, because unhealthy, well, they're more fun to watch and sometimes more fun to live in. Like not fun, but kind of sick fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it's yeah, there's so many like realizations that I feel like you and I are having as we have these conversations about this show. But I do feel like perhaps they had these toxic relationships in the show because yes, they are more entertaining to watch, but B, it kind of romanticizes that um, being naive to important life lessons of just I know that they were in their 30s and 40s and probably should have known better, but like you said earlier, they were kind of acting like as if they were teenagers and embodying that level of being naive to the red flags, if you will. And it's kind of like they're learning as they go, just like all of us are in life. And so I think we can all relate to that we all did have those toxic relationships at the end of the day. Some of us married them, some of us didn't. But at the end of the day, we can relate to it because we've also been fooled by just wanting the happy ending and ignoring red flags along the way. Something else that I wanted to talk about that I realized too was that, yes, these women did have unhealthy relationships with men throughout the show, but I think that the healthiest relationship I saw of the entire show was amongst the women themselves. Like like you said earlier, they were such a cool girl gang and they were there by each other's sides through everything. And so it was like these two very different ways of um, being in relationships were like living side by side. On the one hand, you had these women who, there wasn't any sort of like competition between them. They were always there for each other. They were all fundamentally very different personalities, yet they got along so well and they were there with each other through the ups and downs. And then on the other side of the token, they had all these men that they were kind of toxic with and in and out of each other's lives with, and had all of this drama taking place. So it was it was like the two were kind of coexisting together. Um, so again, going back to that, like the show really painted a very comprehensive view of both healthy and unhealthy relationships. But it's funny that the premise of the show is kind of about finding love and healthy relationships, but the healthy relationships and love mostly existed amongst the women between the women than it did the women
Yeah,
and the men. Is that
'cause
funny?
yeah, it is because they like now I'm thinking they balanced each other so beautifully. Like, and there is a reason there are four of them. If they're like, they had these friendships, like let's say Carrie and Samantha, they might not last that long, but this four of them really balance one another. And they do have like when Miranda wanted to uh I'm trying to find the euphemism, like not being pregnant. And then Charlotte was trying to be pregnant, and then she showed up anyway. And then Miranda broke the news that she's keeping the baby, and then Charlotte was like, "Oh my gosh!" And all of the girlfriends froze. I love that episode so much. They froze, and then Charlotte was like, "Oh my gosh, we gotta have a baby!" And they're all like, "Oh my gosh, she's happy." And then when she had a miscarriage, she showed up at Miranda's son's first birthday as well. So, and they, yeah, like they keep showing up, they keep bringing the issues. Like when Carrie, again, when Charlotte didn't offer money, that Carrie felt angry and she went and she confronted, she just put it on the table. She was very open about the issue at hand with Charlotte. And with men, they were not, they were tiptoeing, they were walking on eggshells, they were not
Hmm.
up front. And like in Charlotte with Harry, she was talking to her girlfriends first before bringing the issues. Like Harry was walking naked around the house, leaving the tea bags, like staining her beautiful sterile white countertops and stuff. So she talked to her friends first and then she brought it. So yeah, it's very interesting how these women, they're just there and they have their issues, they have their mental health problems like all of us do, and they somehow were such like a family, like a chosen family to one another. And they, I feel like this is the thread throughout the show. They brought it sometimes, like depending on the episode, that is like you have your friends as a family, you have the family you chosen, and all of this, and like we're soulmates to each other, we're gonna rescue one another. And it's, yeah, it's so beautiful.
It is. Yeah, I think again, another realization is that, you can find healthy relationships in your life that uplift you and ground you and surround you with love that aren't necessarily romantic. And so I think as women, it's important to keep that in mind that there's not just, we have to get married or have the romantic relationship in order to feel fulfilled in the love department. Granted, a lot of us want that for sure. And you definitely need to honor that if that's something that you're looking for in life. However, on top of that, you should have, or you should consider finding other ways to incorporate love and healthy relationships into your life because they can exist outside of romantic relationships. And I think that this show is a great example of that for sure.
Yeah. And I love asking this recurring question to wrap each episode. What is the biggest lesson and in this transformation, from, I don't know, like watching the show, like how you were before you watched the show, how you like after, or maybe when you watched it in your like younger version of yourself, and if you rewatched it now, what is the biggest lesson? How you view relationships now from the movie?
Such a good question. I'm tempted to say take take things with a grain of salt and um, apply things to your life that make sense to you. But I wouldn't I wouldn't focus too much on the storylines of shows or movies that you watch, um, because it's not necessarily reality, or it doesn't need to be your reality. So take things with a grain of salt for sure.
Yeah, and for me, that literally was the guide into relationships. Like, because what I saw around me were just kind of like, boring parents of my friends, and my parents, like, they had their moments, but it was kind of like very standard in a way, that family life. So these women, they just, for me, it was like, oh my God, I want to be one of them. I want to be like part of their group. And that show really shaped how I view relationships. And it's kind of scary to admit because I'm like, wow, just one show can really shape a lot. And I resonate so much with what you said, Courtney, that just don't align, don't build your relationships based on how it is in the movies. Like let the screen, like the, people on screen, people on shows, movies, in the books, um, be there. Like they're fiction. They're not real because real life is different. And we do want somebody there for us, somebody in the terms of the show boring, because Aiden was portrayed as kind of like a boring guy, right? But we all would benefit from being with an Aiden, not Mr. Big, because it's much healthier. Of course, he has issues. He's a real person. That's what I appreciate about the show. They're all real people, and nobody's perfect, thank God. But just like finding somebody, with like one of the episodes was find somebody who would kiss our two heads and love us the way we are. It was like about the freak show, and I really want to close on that because we just really knowing who we are, knowing that we can build healthy relationships with ourselves first, then, well, yeah, with our friends and with loved ones, with romantic partners. They're all interconnected, and not one relationship prevails over another. So it's, yeah, it's a really interesting show. And please leave a comment down below. Who do you resonate with? Who you identify with? Miranda, Charlotte, Samantha, or Carrie? It would be so cool to read your comments and know if you love the show, if you had the show, if you agree with Courtney and I, or if you'd like to bring the conversation back. We're happy to answer the questions and just really have the conversation going, because this show has so many layers that we probably didn't touch on some. And I feel like that would be cool to have that as a conversation starter. Thank you, Courtney, for playing this game with me. It was such a fun conversation.
So fun. I feel like I could see this almost being like a series where we dissect certain shows from like a relationship standpoint and talk about some of the healthy and unhealthy lessons that can be unpacked from each of the shows.
That. Yeah, again, if you'd like more videos like this, podcasts like this, leave a comment down below and let us know what show you like. Like, I love Grey's Anatomy. I was super late in the game. Like, during the COVID times, I started watching Grey's Anatomy season 1, episode 1. And I really got into this show, and I know that's been iconic as well. Maybe Friends. I don't know. I've never been a fan of Friends, but I know a lot about the shows because it's so much being talked about it. So yeah, we're happy to continue the series. It's been so much fun for us, and we hope that it's been fun for you guys. Stay tuned for another episode. Like and subscribe and follow, and we'll see you sometime in the next one. Thank you for joining us on Navigating the Aftermath. Remember, no matter how challenging the journey may seem, you are not alone. Subscribe for more empowering stories, practical wisdom to help you navigate life's twists and turns. Until next time, keep moving forward with courage and conviction.